Elena stepped onto the gravel courtyard of the outpost with a quiet determination that contrasted sharply with the jeering that met her. Slung over her shoulder was a long, weathered rifle, its wooden stock polished smooth by years of use, and at its top sat the oddity everyone noticed first, an old brass scope that looked more like it belonged in a collector's case than in the hands of a soldier. As she walked past the line of younger recruits, their laughter followed her like a shadow. One of them whistled mockingly, "Hey, did you dig that out of a museum?" Another shook his head, smirking, "What's that thing good for?" "Maybe spotting stars, not enemies." Elena didn't answer. She simply adjusted the strap on her shoulder and kept walking, her boots crunching steadily on the dirt. Her silence seemed only to fuel their ridicule. A taller soldier leaned back against a truck, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "That relic couldn't hit a target past 50 yards. You'd be better off throwing rocks." Their laughter rang out again, careless and cruel. What they couldn't see, what none of them could understand, was what that scope meant to her. It had been her father's, passed down not as a weapon, but as a piece of his legacy. He had taught her with that very rifle under the open sky, teaching her not just to aim with her eye, but with her patience, her breath, and her heart. He had told her once, with a smile that still warmed her memory, "It's not the glass that matters, Elena. It's the eye that sees through it, and the reason behind the shot." The mockery stung, but she did not show it. She carried the weight of their laughter quietly, the way she carried the rifle, with respect. To her, it was not a relic. It was trust. It was love, and though she felt the burn of humiliation, she let it pass over her like wind across stone. Deep inside, she knew that the moment would come when this old, ridiculed scope would show them all a truth they had long forgotten. The laughter faded when the news arrived. A messenger rushed into the outpost, his face pale, his words tumbling over each other with urgency. The enemy had set up artillery nearly 2 miles away, their cannons angled toward a village nestled in the valley. Women, children, and the elderly were there, people with no means of defense, no chance of escape if the shelling began. The chatter of soldiers stilled, the smirks vanished, and a heavy silence pressed down over the courtyard. The captain spread a map across the hood of a jeep, his finger tracing the line of hills where the guns had been spotted. His jaw tightened as he spoke. "They're out of our range. By the time reinforcements arrive, it'll be too late. That village will be rubble." Around him, the soldiers shifted uneasily, their earlier confidence evaporating. They had the best rifles, sleek scopes, and cutting-edge equipment, but none of it could bridge the impossible distance. A murmur of despair passed through the group. Some cursed under their breath, others simply looked away, unwilling to face the image of what was about to happen. One soldier muttered, "We can't touch them, not from here. We're helpless." The weight of those words settled on everyone, and for a moment, it seemed the fate of the village was sealed. Elena stood quietly at the edge of the circle, her fingers resting lightly on the strap of her rifle. Her heart raced as she pictured the families in the village, the children chasing one another through dusty streets, the mothers hanging laundry, the old men who sat in the shade telling stories. She could not shake the thought of their faces turning upward in fear at the first thunder of artillery fire. When the captain's voice faltered with frustration, Elena stepped forward. Her voice was steady, though her stomach twisted with nerves. "Let me try." Heads turned toward her, some in disbelief, others already smirking again at the suggestion. But there was no hesitation in her eyes. She was not thinking of glory or pride. She was thinking of the lives that would end if no one acted. The courtyard erupted with disbelief at Elena's words. A soldier barked out a laugh, shaking his head. "With that antique toy, you couldn't even see the target at 2 miles, let alone hit it." Another added, "This isn't story time, girl. Leave it to real rifles." Their voices overlapped in a chorus of doubt and ridicule, louder now because fear had found an outlet in mockery. The captain's brow furrowed, torn between desperation and disbelief. Elena heard every word, each one sharp and cutting, but she didn't let them sink in. Instead, she unclipped the rifle from her shoulder and knelt down on the packed earth, the world around her narrowing to the familiar weight of the weapon in her hands. The laughter became a distant hum. Her father's voice returned in memory, steady and patient, the same way he had spoken years ago as he lay beside her in tall grass under the stars. "Don't fight the shot," he had told her softly. "Breathe with it, wait, let the world slow down until there's only your heart and the reason you hold the rifle. Aim not to win, but to protect." Her fingers moved instinctively, brushing over the scope's worn brass as though touching a hand long gone. She could almost feel her father's presence beside her, calm and sure. Her nerves trembled, but beneath them ran a current of clarity. She wasn't here to prove anyone wrong. She wasn't here to silence their jeers. She was here because innocent lives depended on what she did next. The soldiers kept muttering, shaking their heads, but a strange stillness began to grow among them as they watched her settle in. Something about her composure, her refusal to answer their scorn, unsettled them. Elena laid her cheek against the rifle stock, her breath slowing, her eyes fixed on the far horizon. She whispered inside herself, not for strength, but for steadiness, for them. For the children. The doubt swirled around her like smoke, but at her center, there was only silence, patience, and the unwavering purpose her father had planted in her long ago. She was ready. Through the scratched brass scope, the world seemed impossibly far, the hills on the horizon blurred by heat and distance. Yet Elena's eye found the faint outline of the artillery gun, a dark shape nestled between ridges. Her heart beat hard against her ribs, each thump echoing like a drum, but she forced her breathing into rhythm. Inhale, hold, exhale. The way her father had taught her when she was a trembling child afraid of missing even a tin can. The air was heavy with tension behind her. Soldiers shifted uneasily, whispering to one another, some still scoffing under their breath, others holding back in uneasy silence. To them, it was an impossible shot, a foolish attempt with an outdated weapon. To Elena, it was something else entirely. This wasn't a test of metal or glass. It was the weight of lives, the faces she imagined in the village below, children barefoot in dusty streets, mothers cooking over small fires, old men watching the horizon with tired eyes. They would never know her name, never see her face, but their survival rested on her steadiness in this single moment. Her finger rested gently on the trigger. She whispered a prayer, not for triumph, but for mercy, for those whose lives hung in the balance, for the courage not to falter. The sound of her breath seemed louder than the murmurs behind her. She let the world shrink until there was only the scope, the crosshairs, and the distant threat. Then, with a calmness that surprised even herself, Elena squeezed. The rifle cracked, echoing sharply through the valley. Time seemed to pause. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, and doubt rippled among the soldiers watching. But then, a bloom of fire erupted on the horizon, smoke curling skyward where the enemy's gun had stood. The explosion thundered back across the hills, rolling into the stunned silence of the courtyard. Every mocking voice died at once. The men froze, their mouths half open, their eyes wide as they stared at the distant plume. Elena lowered the rifle slowly, her hands trembling, not with fear but with the enormity of what had just happened. She had silenced death itself. The courtyard remained silent long after the echo of the explosion faded into the hills. Smoke curled on the horizon where the artillery had been, a black smear against the pale sky. The soldiers who had mocked her only minutes before stood frozen, their disbelief written plainly on their faces. No one laughed now, no one dared. They looked at Elena as though seeing her for the first time, the old rifle still steady in her hands, the brass scope glinting faintly in the sun. Elena's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but not from pride or triumph. It was relief, a deep, aching release that brought tears to her eyes. She wasn't thinking of her aim, or of the soldiers behind her. She was thinking of the village. She imagined mothers pulling their children close, fathers lifting their eyes in gratitude, elders whispering prayers of thanks, never knowing the name of the stranger who had spared them. That thought filled her with a quiet warmth stronger than any applause could ever bring. The captain was the first to move. He stepped toward her slowly, his stern face softened with something close to awe. His voice was quiet but carried to every ear. "You didn't just silence their gun," he said, looking at her with a solemn respect. "You reminded us what courage looks like, what it means to protect, not for glory, but for love." The men who had mocked her shifted uneasily, shame replacing their arrogance. One by one, they straightened, and though no words passed their lips, their eyes lowered in respect. The courtyard that had once echoed with laughter now held a different kind of weight, a recognition, a reverence. Elena lowered the rifle, brushing her hand gently over the worn brass scope as if thanking her father once more. She let a faint smile touch her lips, not for herself, but for the lives still breathing in the valley below. The rifle might have looked like a relic, but it had carried more than bullets, it had carried love, legacy, and purpose. And in that moment, everyone understood. Sometimes the smallest, most doubted things hold the greatest power to save.